Good morning. Good to have everyone with us today. As I look out this morning, I see that we do have some visitors, and we want you to know that you are our special guest. We're so glad that you are with us today. We do encourage you to be back with us at any opportunity that you have. We have a lot of different things going on here. Mike shared a number of things that are happening, and we encourage you to be a part of those different things that are taking place here at Pleasant Grove Road. One thing I want to mention before we get into our lesson is we are going to be starting family groups. These are small groups that will be meeting on the fourth Sunday night of each month, and we'll be meeting in people's homes. We've been talking about this, and the original plan was to start this in February. We're going to push this to March because we have a number of things we need to do to get these organized and set up. But one of the things that this allows us to do is to give you a little more time to prayerfully consider whether or not you want to be a part of these groups. Right now, we do have just enough people to have three of the small groups, but we would like to have these groups just a little bit larger. And so we do encourage you to consider that. The sign-up list is available in the foyer, back on the bulletin board there, and we encourage you to consider that. If you have any questions about these groups, what they work, how they're going to work, and what they're about, please feel free to reach out to me and see me about that, and we will. I'd be glad to talk to you about it and give you a little more information. As we get into our lesson this morning, though, last week we took a walk through Psalm 46, and we looked specifically at the challenge that we face to give up control of our lives and to allow God to be God. To allow God to have his proper place in our lives, knowing that God is going to bring glory to himself and good to you through your life. But in order to do that, we have to trust in God. We have to know that he provides security, and we have to recognize that even in the times in our lives when things seem to be unstable, that God is there and that God is in control. But as we mentioned last week, this requires us to be still. This requires us to be still and to know that God is God. To give up our control and to recognize that he is in control. And we mentioned last week that being still literally means that we just stop struggling. That we take the controls that we have in our lives and we give them over to God. We let him be in control of our lives. But the question I want us to consider this morning is this. If I say I quit, if I say, God, I'm giving it all to you, I'm letting you be in control, where does that put me? Where does that put you? If we finally come to the point where we say, God, I'm going to quit trying to control things in my life. I'm going to be still, and I'm going to wait on you. Where does that put us? I submit to you that puts us in a place where we are living life in the waiting room. In other words, we are waiting on God. Now, I've been a minister for some 35 years now, and I have spent a lot of time in hospital waiting rooms. I have probably spent hundreds of hours in hospital waiting rooms over the years. And we all recognize that these waiting rooms are a place where we sit and we wonder what the outcome is going to be. Someone that we love is having surgery or a procedure or something is happening with them and we are not there. We don't have control. So we are in the waiting room and we are waiting. But what I have noticed over the years is that there tend to be three types of people sitting in those waiting rooms. The first type that you most often see are the people who are waiting for positive news. In other words, they're sitting there saying, I know this is going to be okay. They're going to be all right. This is all going to turn out fine. And they are waiting and they're waiting for positive news. That's the majority. Then you have another group, the ones that come in second, I think, as far as the most often, are those who are waiting for negative news. Oh, I just know this is going to be bad. I just know what am I going to do if this doesn't turn out right? What's going to happen if this doesn't go the way that I want it to go? I just know that this isn't going to be good. And so you have those who are waiting for positive news. You have those who are waiting for negative news. And then you have the minority. There are a few people who are just waiting. They're just waiting. They have this underlying peace that whatever the news is, whether it is good or whether it is bad, it's going to be okay. And they just wait. And I submit to you this morning that there is a huge difference in focus between these three types, because the first two are waiting for something. You see, they've already got mapped out in their mind what the outcome needs to be or is going to be, and they've got it all planned out. And so they're there waiting, but they're waiting for something specific. The other person is just there waiting. And they know that God's in control, and whatever it turns out to be, God will still be in control, and it will be okay. And so they just wait. And so here's the dilemma that we have to face in our own lives. And that is this. Are you waiting for something, or are you just waiting on God? Have you already mapped out what it is that what you think needs to be the outcome? And so you're waiting for God to do what you expect him to do? Or are you just waiting? Am I waiting to finally find that right job? Am I waiting for God to finally bring that right job to me in my life? A job that I'm going to be fulfilled in, I'm going to feel happy, I'm going to be able to support my family. If I'm doing that, I'm waiting for something. Am I waiting for God to bring me that boyfriend or that girlfriend or that husband or that wife? I'm waiting for something. Am I waiting for a child? Am I waiting for that big financial windfall? Am I waiting for my spouse to finally get with the program? Am I waiting for my circumstances to change and for my life to get better? I'm waiting for something. You see, that's the way most people wait. We have an expectation about what we want it to be, the way we want it to turn out, what we want God to do for us, and then we wait and we worry and we become frustrated when it doesn't turn out the way that we expected it to be. And so then we try to manipulate and we try to maneuver the situation, and we take back control because we have an expectation. And so since God's not working it out the way that I want it to work out, I need to take back control. I need to be in charge. But you see, there is a different way to wait on God. You see, this person views life in a different way because they know that ultimately God has everything under control, and so however it works out, it is going to be okay. You know, there was a philosopher who lived around 420 BC. His name was Protagoras, and I agree with very little that Protagoras ever said. This one statement I agree with. I disagree with more than the others probably. He once wrote that man is the measure of all things. In other words, what Protagoras was saying is that everything revolves around us. Everything revolves around us. And so we have a tendency as individuals to think that the world revolves around our personal experiences. Have you ever heard someone say, everybody hates me? Everybody's out to get me. Well, is that actually true? No. I don't know any person on this planet that every single person in this world is out to get them. But what is that person doing? They're viewing everything based on their personal experience, and in their view, everything's revolving around them, and they don't see anybody that likes them. You know, or why does my life always turn out so terrible and everybody else's life turns out great? Well, is that actually true? No. And yet what are we doing? We're viewing life as it revolves around our personal experiences and what we're seeing rather than everything else that is going on around us. And so we have this idea that thinking the world revolves around us. But if that is the way I view the world and I view my life, then I am going to always be controlled by my circumstances. If things go terrible, then everything is terrible. If something bad happens in my life, everything is bad in my life. That's why, have you ever heard of someone saying, and I know none of us have done this, but have you ever heard of someone saying they got up on the wrong side of the bed? You know, what they're really saying is, I am choosing to be in a bad mood because the circumstances of my day are not working out the way I want them to. And so I am making a choice to have everything revolve around me and to be controlled by my personal circumstances. But you see, when you recognize that God is actually the measure of all things, not man, but when you recognize that God is the measure of all things, that everything revolves around him, then and only then will you be able to rest in whatever circumstances you find yourself in. The Apostle Paul said, in whatever circumstance I find myself in, I will be what? Content. Why? Because he wasn't controlled by his circumstances. He gave himself over to the one who is in control. And so the question we want to spend our time looking at this morning is, how do we then wait? How do we wait? If God is the measure of all things, if everything is centers around God, how is it that we actually step back and wait on him? Our text this morning is going to be Isaiah chapter 40. Isaiah chapter 40, and we want to set the scene here. You have the nation of Israel, and they had spent most of their time in protection, God's protection. God had protected the nation of Israel. He had allowed them to be very fruitful and to be safe from other nations. But now, at this point, the nation of Israel is going to have to learn how to wait, because after years of it all being about them, God allows the nation of Israel to go into captivity. They have been taken captive, and they are going to spend 70 years waiting. And so Isaiah 40 is really God talking to the nation of Israel and explaining to them how to wait. And in this message, there's three things we're going to see this morning. And these things are not only a message to the nation of Israel, they're a message to all of God's people. God says there are three things that you need to choose in order to truly wait on him. And the first one is this: we must choose to believe that Almighty God can. We must choose to believe that he is able. You see, one of the struggles that we often have is we all believe in God. You wouldn't be here today if you didn't believe in God. We all say that we believe in the power of God, and we say we know that God has strength, we know that God is able, we know that God is strong. But in this one circumstance, I need to take control because I'm just not sure God's got a full picture here. I'm not sure God's got this specific issue, so I need to take control. I need to be the one managing this whole program here, because while I know God's powerful and I know God's able, this particular situation, it's just different. You see, either we choose to believe that God can, or we choose not to believe that God can. Look at what he says in Isaiah 40. We're going to kind of walk through this passage. We're not going to read the entire chapter, but let's start off in verse 12. God says, "Who has measured the waters in the hollow of his hand, and marked off the heavens with a span, enclosed the dust of the earth in a measure, and weighed the mountains in scales, and the hills in balance?" God says to the nation of Israel, and he says to us, who's had the ability to put all of this in place? Who's had the ability to really hold the future of everything in the palm of his hand? Not man. God says, I'm the only one that has had these abilities. Now look at verses 15 through 17. He says, "Behold, the nations are like a drop from a bucket, and are accounted as dust on the scales. Behold, he takes up the coastlands like fine dust. Lebanon would not suffice for fuel, nor are its beasts enough for a burnt offering. All the nations are as nothing before him. They are accounted by him as less than nothing and emptiness." God says, you look at your nation, whatever it is, as being the greatest in the world. I was here before it began. I will be here when it's gone. I'm here. I'm in control, no matter what happens around you. Just about every nation that has ever existed, including the one that we're a part of, has believed that they're the greatest. They're the best. Every nation thinks that they're the best, and they also think that they're going to be here forever. Guess what? Every nation that has ever existed, every earthly nation, has always had a shelf life. Every single nation has had a beginning, and every single nation has or will have an end, including the one that we're a part of. None of them are invincible. And when every nation began, guess who was there? God. And when every earthly nation ends, guess who will still be there? God. He says, you look at all that's around you, and none of it is all that. But in everything, I'm here. Let's move down to verses 21 and 22. He says, "Do you not know? Do you not hear? Has it not been told to you from the beginning? Have you not understood from the foundations of the earth? It is he who sits above the circle of the earth, and its inhabitants are like grasshoppers, who stretches out the heavens like a curtain and spreads them like a tent to dwell in." Basically what God is saying here is, it is ridiculous to question his capacity. It is ridiculous to question his capability. You see, is there anything that you can think of that God cannot handle? God has the power to move heaven and earth to accomplish his will. And he has done it, and he will continue to do it. And so what it boils down to in our lives, if we are going to learn to wait on God, is, do you choose to believe that your God is able? Do you choose to believe that in every circumstance in your life, God is able? I'm not asking, do you believe that God will work out everything the way you want it to work out? But do you believe ultimately that God can? That he is in control? The first thing we have to do is choose to believe that the Almighty can. But the second thing we must do is choose to believe that the Almighty cares. That he truly does care. You know, sometimes I think we have this view that God is above us somewhere and he's looking down on us, but he's got so much other stuff to be involved in that he can't possibly be concerned about my personal life. You know, can't be possibly concerned about what's going on in my life. I remember one time I heard someone saying a prayer. They were actually at a hospital waiting. Their family member had been in a car accident. And they were saying a prayer, and they said, God, I know you're really busy, but if you could just listen to me for just a minute. And I thought about that because I often wonder how many of us kind of feel that way. That God's so busy with other stuff, how could he possibly be concerned with me and what's going on in my personal life and what's happening with my family, with my job, with my situation, with my health? Well, let's pick up in verses 25 and 26. To whom then will you compare me, that I should be like him, says the Holy One. Lift up your eyes on high and see, who created these? Who brings out their host by number, calling them all by name, by the greatness of his might, and because he is strong in power, not one is missing. You see, God says, I know every detail. I know every one of my children. I can call them by name. They have a number. They are accounted for. You know, scriptures tell us that God knows so much about us that he knows right down to the number of the hairs on our heads. Now, for me, that is getting easier and easier to count as time goes on. But it still would be a challenge. But God doesn't even have to count. God knows. God knows every detail of our lives. He knows every challenge that we are facing, every hurt that we have been through. Verse 27, he says, why do you say, O Jacob, and speak, O Israel? My way is hidden from the Lord, and my might is disregarded by my God. This is a temptation that many of us have when we're living life in the waiting room, and that is to say, God, you must not know personally what I'm going through. You must not know personally what I'm dealing with in my life. We won't go as far as to say God doesn't care, but we'll say, what I'm dealing with is unique. You know, I have found it interesting over the years how many of us tend to think that we've gone through something that nobody else has ever gone through. You know, no one else has ever dealt with it. The reality is that we've all dealt with challenges in our lives, and God knows every single one of those challenges. And God cares. In 1 Peter chapter 5 and verse 7, Peter says, casting all your care upon God, for he cares for you. Give your care to him, give your burdens to him, because he cares for you. You know, one of the greatest joys that I have had in ministry is the opportunity to watch and see how God has worked in the lives of people. Over the many years that I've been involved in ministry, time and time and time again, I've been able to see God working in people's lives. And the reality is that God's timing is always perfect. He doesn't always work things out the way that I expect them to, but God always gives me what I need. The psalmist says in Psalm 27 and verse 14, he says, wait for the Lord, be strong, and let your heart take courage. Wait for the Lord. You see, when we choose to believe that God cares for us, that God truly, he is able and he cares, then and only then can we truly wait. Truly stop and just wait and let God be God. Let him be in control. Which leads us to the final point, and that is, know that waiting on God is what provides us all that we need. When we truly hand the controls over to God, there's this amazing thing that happens. God takes care of all of our needs. It's when we keep pulling those controls back, that's when we don't have our needs met, because we're not allowing God to do his work. But when we will just hand the controls over to him and say, God, you've got this, I know I don't, then all of our needs start being met. That peace starts pouring into our lives. That help starts pouring into our lives. Let's finish up this morning by reading Isaiah 40, verses 28 through 31. This is personally my go-to passage. If you're allowed to have a passage as a mantra, this is mine. This is my favorite, and it is one of the most beautiful passages. But this passage has gotten me through more struggles in my life than I can even count. And listen to what God says. Have you not known? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He does not faint or grow weary. His understanding is unsearchable. He gives power to the faint, and to him who has no might, he increases strength. Even youths shall faint and be weary, and young men shall fall exhausted. But they who wait for the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. We have an amazing promise here. And I want you to notice here, the first thing as we get to the end of this passage is he says that those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. But then he says they shall mount up with wings like eagles. Have you ever seen an eagle soar? You know, there is you can get on YouTube, but there's also some live streams of an eagle here in the U.S. that has a camera attached to him. And you can just watch him soaring through canyons. And you actually get to view what that eagle sees. And an eagle is able to get a view when he's soaring in the air that he would never get on the earth. He's able to see things that he would never see anywhere else. You know, I will never forget, years ago, I was in high school, and we were watching a baseball game, high school baseball game, and we see this eagle flying over the field, and as he's flying over, we notice something fall, and he drops a fish down on the baseball field. And next thing we know, this eagle has circled around, and guess what he does? He comes right back down, and without ever touching the ground, he picks that fish up with his claws and keeps on flying. You see, he was able to see. We were still trying to figure out what was that fell from the sky. And this eagle was able to see and to do because of the view that he had. God says, if you will just wait on me, I will give you the ability to soar like the eagles. But then he goes on to say, if you will just wait on me, I will give you what you need so that you can run without ever becoming weary. Now notice here he talks about running and walking. Running is something we do when we need to do something quickly, and we don't necessarily need the ability or the durability. We just need the ability or the strength to do it quickly. There's an emergency. I've got to run. I've got to move fast. And he says, God gives you that strength. But then he says, if you wait on me, I'll give you the strength to walk and never get tired. He says, I'm going to give you the endurance that you need. I'm going to give you the endurance for the long haul. And so number one, he says, if you will just wait on me, he says, I'm going to allow you to soar. I'm going to allow you to have the perspective that takes you above your circumstances and to see things for what they really are. You know, when we're in that waiting room and we have expectations, we say, well, okay, God, I need you to do this, this, and this. But when we're in the waiting room and we're simply waiting on God, God gives us the ability to soar above the circumstance and to see everything involved and to realize that all those things that I think need to work out a certain way may not. He gives us that ability to have a true perspective, but then they shall run and not be weary. He gives us the power and the endurance to allow us to travel more ground and to accomplish more things quickly. And then we shall walk and not faint. The promise is you can go the distance. If you will just wait on God, he will give you the strength to go the distance. Have you ever been at a point in your life where you've just said, well, I just don't think I've got it in me anymore. I just don't think I can do this anymore. I don't think I can hold on any longer. I just don't think I have it in me. If you say that, you're saying that because you're waiting in the waiting room expecting something. But you see, if you can just wait on God, he'll give you the strength for the long haul. He will give you the wings to soar like eagles. He will give you the strength to run. And he will give you the endurance to walk. But my question this morning is, where does all that come from? Where does all that come from? Where does our ability to soar, our ability to run, our ability to walk, where does this come from? Ultimately, it comes from waiting on God. You see, if we will just learn to be still and to know that he is God, that he is in control, it gives us the ability to truly wait on him. And to be still and to know that beyond whatever circumstances we face in this life, God is good. You know, I don't do it all the time anymore, but for a year or so here, I would get up every Sunday and I would say, God is good, and you would say all the time, and I would say all the time, and you would say God is good. We still do it occasionally, right? But there was a Sunday, after we'd been here about a year, that was probably one of the worst days of my life. And I got up in that pulpit and I said, God is good. And I meant it. And I was only able to do that because God has taught me how to wait on him. You see, when we wait upon the Lord, he renews our strength. He gives us the ability to soar like eagles. He allows us to run. He allows us to walk, to go the distance. But that only happens when we learn to be still and to know that he is God. If you're subject to the invitation, we invite you to come as we stand, as we sing.